Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Green from Ladenburg Technology Banking. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here today to today's short panel called AI Opportunities, Pitfalls and Applications. Now, while we obviously can't chart the entire landscape of artificial intelligence in our brief 25 minutes, we can highlight a few considerations for investors in this rapidly evolving space. We have a truly exceptional group of sharp minds joining us today, and they'll be sharing their invaluable perspectives as AI continues its relentless evolution. So let's meet our experts. First, from Ladenburg's own technology research team, we have Glenn Mattson, who spent 27 years on the tech side on Wall Street with a valuable perspective from both buy side and sell side. His expertise is in the advancing field of automation, spelt with AI. Remember that as a Ladenburg thing, you've heard. Software, robotics, machine vision, defense tech, and public safety. John Hickman, who brings over 3 decades of Wall Street experience analyzing tech companies, and his focus at Ladenburg is digital media, ad tech, fintech, and crypto. Mike Legg, who recently joined Ladenburg in April with a focus on the cutting edge of nuclear, clean tech, advanced materials, and other transformative innovations. We're also honored to have 2 of our platinum sponsors from the legal arena. We have Eric Victorson, a capital markets partner at Sullivan and Worcester, who brings expertise representing issuers and underwriters in cross-border equity capital markets. Jonathan Grossman, an antitrust and consumer protection partner at Cozen, with crucial insights into the antitrust issues that can arise in M&A. And finally, representing the innovative power of AI in action, Dan Brahmy, co-founder and CEO of Israeli company Cyabra, which is going public shortly, which leverages AI to tackle the critical challenge of disinformation. So let's dive into this conversation and ask some questions. If I push the slide right, 1 second, I'm waiting for the slide to come up. So starting with you, Glenn, what do you see as the biggest growth areas where AI will make a substantial difference, particularly in automation?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for having us, and thanks, everybody, for coming. Yeah, there's so many interesting things going on. What a time to be investing and to be alive in this AI revolution that's going on. And one thing that came to my mind when I thought about the most interesting new areas is just this agentic AI it's on the top of everyone's mind. I think of examples, it can be simple as, this is basically defined as systems that will go out and kind of take on tasks for you, kind of mundane things. They can act autonomously to complete goals, without checking back with a human, without kind of really, working hand in hand with the operator. There's a lot of challenges with that, but also a lot of opportunities, I think. Dan, as I understood from his brief description to me earlier, what his company does could help actually solve a lot of the challenges. Some of the challenges might be like if you could easily get a agentic AI bot to say program to do something nefarious on the internet and say get this task done in any way possible, it could multiply itself by millions of times and then go out and just kind of flood the internet with or whatever with all kinds of disinformation. So perhaps we'll hit into that later. But the opportunities is just ridiculous increases in productivity. There's people talking about productivity gains of kind of unheard of levels, things that economists don't even understand how to model for, and it could have significant impacts, obviously societal impacts. But one example that a company brought up to me was in the sales function. There might be, historically, you might have 10 salespeople in your business, maybe you have 1,000 leads, and you're going to make those 10 salespeople focus through incentives on the most, the highest value opportunities, or the ones that have the easiest conversion rate or that kind of thing. Well, you're leaving the other 90% of the sales opportunities on the table. Well, with agentic AI, it's basically at no cost whatsoever. You can go after those opportunities more so than you could with like the chat bots, which are just basically IVR deflection devices that are frustrating experiences for everyone. It's an incredible productivity enhancer. It's something that could really change how we all work and live in a very short period of time. So I think that's to me that tops the list in terms of your question, Mark. So.
Great, thanks very much. And John, we have a question up here about how has AI changed the business models of high-performance compute companies, but really relating to what Glenn has said, the whole need to compute AI and the demands that it has, and that leads well into what Mike can talk about as the power requirements and how this is going to change the landscape.
So, Suzanne?
Yes.
For those of you who know a little bit about Bitcoin mining, it involves a data center with GPUs in there cranking out, hashing to solve the puzzle to generate a Bitcoin every 10 minutes. So Bitcoin miners are, they're beholden to the needs for power. They're also beholden to the price of Bitcoin and all that entails. So this idea that I can take my data center that does Bitcoin mining and I can replace the GPUs with different like NVIDIA machines, and all of a sudden I can do high performance computing, and I can do either training or inference for AI. All of a sudden I'm not beholden to the price of Bitcoin and all that entails. And I can get 70 or 80% margins with contracts for people like, OpenAI or Microsoft or hyperscalers like that. So many Bitcoin miners have jumped into this idea that I can do HPC, and it is changing their business models. They're not abandoning Bitcoin mining per se, but it is giving them an opportunity for another revenue stream, and maybe one that's more predictable and maybe even a little more profitable, depending on what happens with Bitcoin.
And going to you, Mike, related to emerging industrial technologies such as AI generation and infrastructure and power needs, how has that changed the landscape of power? I mean, all of these are. Glenn talks about how AI is an opportunity from an application level. John is talking about how it's transforming the models of companies that were doing something else and see AI as an opportunity. It has to get powered. What are the issues?
When you look at the growth of AI data centers and the need for power to fuel them, there's a doubling of energy needs, globally. In the U.S. alone, there's a tripling expected by 2050 of nuclear energy. Alongside that, you look at nuclear energy, it's only clean, scalable, consistent power source for the AI data centers. The government's gotten on board here. They passed the Advanced Act, which streamlines the regulatory process, helping them come faster. In the public markets, you have, three smaller SMR companies, NuScale, Oklo, and Nano Nuclear, all pursuing the micro-reactors. On the fuel side, Halo Fuel, which is 20% enriched uranium versus the 5% traditional uranium fuel, is being developed also. Companies like Centrus and Lightbridge are in the public markets in the fuel side. So, we see the need for significant growth alongside the AI data centers of nuclear power, and think that's a great opportunity in the public markets.
So my last question for the analyst then. When you add it up, what are some of the most undervalued AI-related investment opportunities at the moment?
We can actually mention names.
You're an analyst. You can say whatever you like. But I would say more
I
generally
already had
in
my
areas,
advertising from him, so that's okay.
generally in areas that you would say are misunderstood at the moment, that you think there'll be corrections in a positive manner.
General areas that are misunderstood. I mean, not only, so I work on the enterprise side and software and AI, also the defense tech side. I mean, what's happening in defense tech is just like, the technological advancements that are happening there. I don't know if anyone saw the 60 Minutes interview this weekend with Anduril CEO. I mean, it's happening at light speed, but I think for me, what makes it so interesting is that what's in the defense tech space today will be in your pocket in like 20 years if you think about GPS and the internet and all that kind of stuff. So it's an area I like to keep track of in that sense. But certainly there's some value to be found there.
Well, to add on to what I said earlier about Bitcoin companies that are switching their business models, there's been a number of announcements, but I think there's only a couple that are really focused on the high-performance computing, and there's one in particular that's that I think that's the farthest along in this transformation, and I'm going to go ahead and mention the name. It's Core Scientific. The company's tied in very heavily with CoreWeave, and CoreWeave recently went public, and the stocks, they went public at 40. I think the stock's trading at 100 today, and so Core Scientific has not performed quite like that. I think there's a huge opportunity for them to do really well in the coming
And Mike,
years.
very briefly, any
Yeah, I mean, the ones I mentioned earlier, nuclear SMR companies, Oklo, NuScale, Nano, and on the fuel side, you have companies like Centrus and Lightbridge out there, and I think they're all great opportunities.
Thank you. So moving to the lawyers, Eric, how have recent AI trends manifested in capital markets financing opportunities for investors and issuers, and what are some of the pitfalls that we've seen in previous cycles, not related necessarily to this, but maybe to crypto, that you might want to refer to?
Well, I think, as has been mentioned, there's been an explosion of AI across sectors, applications, companies that weren't doing AI, now they're getting into it. So I think there is tremendous opportunity for companies that are ready. When it comes to public companies, that means that you're ready to go with a data room that's populated for investors or investment banks to diligence. You've got a shelf registration statement, so you can quickly access capital if opportunities rise. There are, we've seen instances over the past couple of years where companies that are either pure play in AI or I'd say AI adjacent, somewhat linked. They have tremendous amounts of volume off the basis of good news, and there are opportunities to raise financing, not when you need to raise financing, but when you can. So, the proliferation of AI across sectors and applications, we've seen just more and more companies be able to raise capital on the back of it. Now, when it comes to pitfalls, and so that this isn't a fad like the crypto situation was, I mean, you have to be mindful of good disclosures, accurate disclosures, making sure that you are telling a good story, and you're not, I guess, overhyping things, overpromising, and then under-delivering.
Great, thank you very much. Jonathan, for investors in the rapidly growing AI space, what are the antitrust pitfalls to avoid? I'm sure there's more than 2 minutes would allow, but maybe you'll just give a highlight of that.
Well, in 2 minutes, I'll give you one, which is the concern that collecting and disseminating big data to competitors creates a price-fixing risk, a risk of being prosecuted or accused of price-fixing civilly. Let me just explain that as quickly as I can, which is, classic price-fixing is a smoke-filled room where people fix a price. But forever, there's been case law that the sharing of commercially sensitive data, non-public data among competitors, and then parallel conduct can give rise to price-fixing allegations and price-fixing liability. And the advent of big data and AI technologies that collect data of competitors in an industry and then turn around and disseminate that information to those industry players, alongside with often analytical tools to help them price, creates a lot of risk. And I'm not suggesting that every business model that does that is anti-competitive or illegal, but DOJ and FTC and private plaintiffs have brought 4 cases recently against big industries in the real estate industry, hotel pricing, in agriculture, and the 4th one is escaping me. I'll get there in a second. But in all of those cases, there's healthcare was the other one, healthcare pricing by managed care. So you got to look out for that fact pattern, right? And look in particular at anyone whose business model is to collect all that data from competitors, turn around and then disseminate that to the rest of the industry, even if it's anonymized, right, has the potential, and then particularly help them pricing, has the potential to create that risk. And one thing to keep in mind there is that's not just pricing of your product, it can also be what you purchase, because a conspiracy on the buy side is just as illegal as a conspiracy on the sell side. And if you go one step further on that, one of the biggest costs that people have is labor, and there are cases out there that are labor conspiracy cases, and you can't sleep on that. So if there's something that's out there that's helping people set wages for class of workers, that has some potential risks. So again, not saying everything's illegal, but before you make a big investment, I would say, in a technology that does something like that, consult your antitrust lawyer.
So just the last question to the two lawyers. Very briefly, what's the biggest unaddressed AI risk in capital raising today?
Honestly, I think that the lack of legislation in a lot of places, so you can't really disclose around some of the risks. I think we've seen, messaging from this federal administration that they want to, have things be loose around AI, so that they can unleash the power of, American ingenuity, which is all great, but sometimes with lack of legislation, lack of regulation, you don't know what the risks really are, and things can pop up any time if there's no real roadmap. So that can make things difficult for companies to actually fully disclose what the risks are that investors take.
Jonathan?
I'll stick with his answer. It's not really my department, so whatever he said sounded good to me.
But we mentioned about this administration, as you know, this administration is quite focused on fake news, and that's a good segue to Dan, whose company spots fake news as part of one of the things it does. Dan, could spotting fake news, and I'm talking about specifically for this audience, could it be a stock picking tool for investors?
Wow. I guess you'll be coming out of this panel being like so bummed by all the answers, being afraid of AI, but this is not the point. The point is to give maybe a little bit of hope. The truth is, 2 years ago, there was a story about the Pentagon exploding. I don't know if you heard about this. It was an interesting story. You could see the picture, and it was like flames and fumes and everything, and you could see that the account was on Twitter. And it was a blue check mark account. So it's supposed to be authenticated and everything. And then we quickly realized that it was a blue check mark because they paid for it, but it was a fake Bloomberg account. The picture looked so realistic. It didn't matter to most people because a couple of hours later, I believe the number was a few tens of billions of dollars was wiped out from the S&P 500. So if you remember that there was a blip in 2022, that was the blip. Okay, I can give you another one if you want. I was just talking about it on the keynote before that, about a publicly traded company called Netflix. There were some conversations on social media about Netflix donating to a political candidate, which was not true. The company never donated money. Maybe the CEO did, maybe the chairwoman, maybe whomever it is. And yet, the one who actually suffered from the repercussion of that perception, because in my world, perception becomes reality, which means if I'm looking at it the same way, I think that this is how you should look at it as investors, in public markets investors. It didn't matter because the same day that the rumor started about Netflix and that Netflix donated money, the negative sentiment over the company grew by 315% in a single day. So obviously it had a tremendous impact on the PPS, on the price per share. So to go back to your question, again, don't want to have that overwhelmingly omnipresent, looming sadness. This is not the point. But the point is to say, I think that regardless of my job and my position right now, being very objective, I believe that investors in public markets need to be aware that their job will not be fully done and properly executed without the understanding of that filtering, right? What am I looking at? Is it real? Is it bad? Is it fake? What's the agenda behind the scenes? Is it, bot amplified with 2%, but it's actually impacting 97% of the conversation about the fact that, you know, the SVP, blah, 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 has done XYZ, or the product is default and the taste is so bad for food and beverage industry, you name it. We're seeing it in national security and defense because we serve a lot of these. We're seeing this with food and beverage, healthcare, pharmaceutical companies, retail, and so on and so forth. So if you're asking me, not only selfishly speaking, because my company is trying to solve that issue.
Using AI.
Correct. So we're trying to leverage kind of the authentic AI against the bad and fake AI in a way. But objectively speaking, I feel like your job as people taking positions in publicly traded companies one day or another is about to change drastically because the barriers to creating, to mimicking human behavior and generating content at scale and also altering, you know, behavioral patterns to propagate things very quickly, like it's been said earlier, the barriers are just so low. It's just so low. It's so easy, so accessible. And so, of course, yes, there's a need for a company like ours, but forget about my company. Focus on you being more skeptical, checking twice, and taking the time to really understand, I guess, kind of the behind the scenes, right? Mm-hmm. That's how life would probably change within the next year or two in your field.
Thank you very much. So it's just a brief panel. We've got maybe a couple of minutes if anybody has any particular questions. Please go ahead.
Also, the largest problem today, the way I see it in AI, is hallucinations. It creates liability issue for the lawyers in the room, and it creates implementation for agents. How do you know if it's really what is not? So I'm looking to see if the panel knows of any opportunities for companies that are working right now to mitigate this issue with hallucinations. The big guys are not doing it, you know, the ChatGPT of the world and so on, they're not doing it, but I know there are small companies that are trying to tackle this. So if anybody has any ideas for opportunities, I would love to hear it.
So I'll just briefly touch on that. The one company I covered that I could talk to you about afterwards, I don't think we're supposed to talk about specific companies on, but you know, they're using kind of an approach where they're pulling data from multiple large language models and then, like, you know, using an algorithm to kind of figure out which one makes sense, or to kind of back check one versus the other, just for that reason, to kind of prevent that hallucination factor from creeping in. Because this company, you know, applies their software, you know, backfills with the LLMs to kind of present brands. So the brands are very concerned about, you know, especially in car, they work with car companies. So if you ask a car company a question and then the brand could be associated with the false answer or whatever. So they're working to mitigate that risk just by almost like cross-checking versus a variety of sources. That's perhaps one way of attacking the problem.
Assuming they're not all sucking the same information from the same sources, and they're all going to give you the wrong information.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess. But maybe that they'd all have the same hallucination would be unlikely, perhaps.
It's consistent. So
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah, go ahead.
Given the,
One of our sponsors, by the way.
Hey, Bill Bruno from Kroll. Given the lower barriers to entry to starting an AI business and the fact that you may no longer need so many programmers or overhead, how do you invest in AI businesses at this point? Are you just throwing darts across the board, or are there like moats that you can identify in terms of evaluating an investment that's going to be sustainable, given that, you know, these are sort of iterative processes that build upon each other, and I don't understand how one can pick an AI company that's going to succeed in the future.
Can I? Is that okay? I've got a little thing here. In the last few months, as an AI-driven company, we've changed about almost 25% of our infrastructure. So 7 years in the making, raising money from Peter Thiel and all the beautiful titles and whatnot, changed 25% of the infrastructure the last few months. And this is the tech. The go-to-market infrastructure is about to change as well as we speak. So what I'm about to say is, again, this is my very personal opinion, but in this world of hallucinations and creating AI-driven businesses so easily and not necessarily needing to raise that much money, I would claim that the main advantages right now are either based on the uniqueness of the data. So I was always giving that example of, if you know of a grandmother of yours that is hidden in Peru with a library with only transcripts and hieroglyphs in it, and you're the only one who has access to it, this is a great AI-driven business. You know why? Because nobody has access to it. Meaning, you'd be the only one that can be the ChatGPT for your grandmother's hieroglyph in Peru, right? So the uniqueness of the data is a really big piece into what's about to train the LLMs, and then therefore the output. And then the second piece is the output is based on algorithms. So if everybody in the world sees the data through a green lens, right? But I am the only company that actually developed something which is the red lens, so the blue lens, and it will take time for people to adapt to it, then it's either about the uniqueness of the data or the uniqueness about the AI models that you're building. Besides that, I feel like everything will be somehow commoditized within the next few years, and then depending on the end user, if it's a government, it might not take weeks, it might take 3 or 5 years, but at some point it will happen. So,
Unfortunately, we have run out of time. So thank you very much, everybody.